All right. So, as we know, the UFC is apparently doing Mikey Musumeci in a grappling match, which could potentially open the door to the UFC going ONE FC style, not just doing MMA, but doing events that are jiu-jitsu oriented, doing events that might potentially be boxing oriented, Muay Thai, kickboxing, catch wrestling. The list goes on, and I think that might actually be good for the UFC and Dana White. Definitely better for power slap. You know, I don't even get me started on the whole power slap thing. I'm not a fan of that. I mean, it's interesting clips. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that it's gone the way it's gone, I think that Dana White needs to add something to the UFC to kind of spice it up a bit, because that's like the thing. As great as the UFC is, you have to switch it up. Otherwise, people are eventually going to get bored with it. I appreciate MMA always, so I don't have that problem. But some people do eventually get bored of the same old song and dance. But leading into that, Mikey Musumeci brought Gordon Ryan into the conversation because he talks about a lot of usage of performance-enhancing substances. And we all know that Gordon Ryan is pretty vocal about it. And even then, on the interview he did at the UFC, he talked about how Mikey Musumeci does this moral high ground. Those people are the fakest, right? And you know what? That is a statement I agree with. You know, people who try to act like they are above it all are usually the ones who are usually not above it all. You know, that's why I kind of trust Sean Strickland so much, is he's not trying to act like he has any moral high ground. You just kind of get what you get with him, and he doesn't really have a hidden agenda, because why does he need to? He's just unapologetically, openly him, right? But Gordon Ryan also went on to talk about, and you know, this is all my interpretation, my opinion. I don't want to, know this is fact, but he alluded to how his, fights where people want to see the best athletes where they're completely shredded and everything like that, alluding to, is the UFC going to be doing substance testing when it comes to jiu-jitsu? Because a lot of different governing bodies in jiu-jitsu don't really test for those. And I admit, as someone who has competed at local tournaments before, you can't really tell who's on what. I mean, in that area, whether you're in the normal everyday tournaments or you're going to the big stages, ADCC, world stages, I guess you could say, you really don't know what exactly it is you're going to get when you hang around that. So you can't realistically test all those athletes. But with the UFC, if they were to do one-on-one fights, where it's kind of like a card where you have Mikey Musumeci versus Rolatolo, Cad Rolatolo. Sorry, I always mispronounce his name. But if those two were to have like a main event, then all the co-mains, just kind of like it was a UFC card, but with jiu-jitsu, yeah, you could probably get away with testing a bunch of people rather than going to your local Naga tournament where you have like 50 people signed up. How do we test all these people from now at weigh-ins until the actual matchups? And it also showed that like Gordon Ryan was talking about how he's championing people to be using these things. So there's a big, conflict. And where am I going with all this? Potentially, could we see Gordon Ryan in the UFC if they go this jiu-jitsu grappling route, if the Mikey Musumeci fights that they're doing are actually going to go anywhere and open up the floodgates to jiu-jitsu brackets or Muay Thai brackets that we could probably watch on weeknights or Friday nights? Because honestly, I would love it if the UFC went one style. That would be really, really cool. But would it mean that Gordon Ryan, who the internet is very onto him, and he's been, very alluding to this, will he have to forego his secret juice, for a matter of fact? If he's really doing it, right? We can't prove anything on this channel, but will he have to go completely natural if he's not already natural? Wink. But I don't know. And that would actually be really interesting. It would be a really good social experiment, because we're so used to a ripped, jacked Gordon Ryan going in and dominating. like against like the Craig Joneses and all the big names. Whether you want to admit it or not, Gordon Ryan is the best at jiu-jitsu. He is the king at that sport. But if you were to take that substances out of the equation and say, okay, you know what, now the UFC is going to test, would we see a less than Gordon Ryan in the future? Probably. Now with Mikey Musumeci, I don't really believe that he's actually really on anything if he's going that loud now. Now, obviously, there's like a rule like accuse your enemies of what you're really doing, right? I don't really know if that's him. I really don't think I would agree with everything if I were to meet Mike Musumeci. Sorry if I'm butchering his name to his face. I don't know if we would agree on every single page, but he doesn't seem like the guy that would try that whole, illegal substance usage. He just kind of seems very natural, although he is in phenomenal shape. But that might just be from constant training, looking after his nutrition, the fasting he does. But if he's going to be doing that grappling event in the UFC, will he be tested? Yes, I'm pretty sure he will. And then that's when we're going to see, is he as clean as he's making it out to be? Is he on anything? In fact, if he were to pop under any circumstances, would Gordon Ryan have kind of like a field day? I think that, these jiu-jitsu fights and potentially UFC going one style might show us more than just, more than just the different styles of competition. Because the thing about MMA and the UFC is the drama is there. There's a lot of publicity. There's a lot of personal beefs that get put out there in the public that we all see. But jiu-jitsu doesn't have nearly as much of that, or it's not as amplified. But the UFC might actually amplify that, where we're not just going to see jiu-jitsu matches in the UFC. What we're actually going to be seeing is a lot of personal beefs, vendettas, marketed by Dana White, yours truly. That might be putting a whole new lens on these other sports, and we'll be able to see if there's enough dirty laundry in these just as much as there is in MMA. But that's my little ramble about jiu-jitsu integrating into the UFC. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out. Take care. Drink plenty of water.